Good morning, it's Friday again, doing chess number 4, and today I'm not going to be doing a live 15-10 game. Instead, I think I'm going to be showing one of my own games that I played about, when was this? This was played back from January to February of this year, and I played against an opponent in correspondence chess. His name was Anti-Hand, rated a little bit higher than I was at the time. And this was a correspondence game, a 3-day correspondence game where you have plenty of time to move on each turn. So there's no time pressure at all. And I'm going to be going through this game and showing you why you shouldn't panic and resign. Now, I was white. I started off the game with c4. This is called the English opening, which I don't really play as often anymore. This is this is an opening I don't really like. I don't really like playing as much as white anymore. But my opponent Anti-Hand plays e5. This is I think this is the most standard move in the English opening. The King's English variation. Knight to c3 was played. Knight to f6. I played g3. And now he plays d5. Pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn. Now, if I take the knight here, then that helps him develop his queen, so I don't do that. Instead, I play bishop to g2, attacking his knight twice. So he moves his knight to b6, e3, bishop to e7, simply developing. I play b3, looking to develop the dark square bishop here because this diagonal is pretty closed off and probably won't be opening. Castles, bishop to b2, c6, knight from g to e2, bishop to g4 pinning the knight, castles, and queen to d3. So I'm not really sure what this queen is doing on d3, but he played queen to d3, attacking a defended knight. Bishop to e4, attacking the queen. The queen can be harassed pretty well here. I don't really like queen to d3 if I'm black in this position. I'd probably just play a developing move like knight to d7 or queen to c7, or even queen to d7. So queen to d3, bishop to e4, queen goes back to d7, and now queen to c2, attacking the pawn on h7, f5, attacking my bishop. Bishop drops back to g2, and now e4. And it looks like, well, right now my bishop is kind of like trapped here. They call this biting on the granite. That's what he did. Bishop's biting on a rock. It's not very useful right now. So knight to f4, but this move e4 like gives up this square for my knight. It can still be kicked away with g5, but if g5 is played, and it was played, it kind of weakens the king's safety a little bit. But I mean, I guess there's really nothing wrong with g5, as there's really no threats against his king. His king is still kind of safe. But this diagonal does look pretty scary for black. So knight goes back to e2. So bishop to f6, rook from f to e1. I'm not sure what I was doing with this move. I guess I anticipated pushing a pawn. No, I think I was defending the knight. Yeah, that's what I was doing. I was defending the knight because I was planning to move this knight. And then, because if I move this knight's undefended, so I wanted to defend that knight. And maybe later this file opens up. Never know. Alright. Rook to d8. Rook from a to d1, defending the pawn and moving my rooks to the center. Queen d3 and rook to c1, defending my queen. I didn't want to take his queen here, as his pawn would become kind of a thorn in my side on d3. So rook to c1, Bishop takes knight, knight takes bishop, queen takes queen, rook takes queen, and now the game is a little bit more simplified, going into an endgame here. It's still even. I have the bishop pair. Well, not anymore, but it's two knights versus the knight and the bishop. Usually the knight and the bishop is a little bit stronger than the pair of knights. Alright, so knight to a6, finally developing that knight in the corner. Knight to d4, knight to e7, rook to c1. My position is definitely better because my rooks are active, his rooks are not so active. My bishop isn't that good right now, but it can be good later. Like my bishop can drop to f1 and be useful on this diagonal. My knight is better placed than his knight. King g7. I guess he's trying to get the king involved, but it's a complete blunder, as you can see. King to g7 just allows knight to e6 check, winning the rook and winning the exchange. That's what it's called when you give up a knight or bishop for a rook. It's called winning the exchange. So I won the exchange here. So knight takes rook, rook takes knight, as he blundered with king g7. So bishop to f1, as finally the bishop wasn't doing anything on this diagonal, so this diagonal is definitely better. Now knight to c7 was played. I guess he was worried about bishop takes knight doubling his pawns and making his double isolated pawns a target on the a file and this target on the c file. So knight c7, trying to reposition the knight, rook d1, trying to push this pawn. So knight c to d5 and bishop to c4. Knight to b6, and I think around this time of the game, I wasn't exactly sure what to do. I played d4 here, and he did not take my bishop. He played knight to d5. So I decided to take his knight for whatever reason. I guess because my bishop really wasn't that good after all. I mean, the game is still kind of closed. And I just wanted to exchange pieces because I'm ahead in material, I'm up the exchange. So I guess that's what I wanted to do. So knight takes bishop and king to f1, trying to get my king more into the game, as it is the end game, and that's what you want to do in the end game. You want to centralize your king and make your king part of the action. Alright, so king e6, rook c2, a6, probably looking to play b5 or something like that. King e2, knight f6, a4. If b5 is played though, I can take this pawn with check and then take this pawn, so I don't know why he played a6. Knight goes back to d5, and I don't really see any way to make progress as black. I don't really see any good moves for black. Obviously white is much better, up the exchange and in a better position from what it seems here. a5, just grabbing more space. Rook to f8, probably going to play f4 in the future, but I'm not sure how that's going to give black much of an advantage. Rook for d to c1, doubling up on the c file. Knight to b4. Now, I remember I almost played rook c5, but that would have landed right into a fork with knight to d3. And if that's played, I couldn't even play rook to e5 check to get out of it, because the knight can just take the rook on e5, as it's still in striking position of the knight, so I couldn't even do that. So I played rook c4 instead. Knight d5, h3, preventing black from pushing g4. Basically just controlling those squares over on the king side, preventing black's pawns from doing too much. Rook f7, f3, trying to open up this game a little bit and give myself a bigger advantage. Pawn takes pawn, king takes pawn, h5, and now e4. opening up the game even more. Pawn takes, king takes, rook f2, trying to get active with the rook. My king safety though might not be that good right now. I better be kind of careful with my king safety right now. Kind of in the middle of the board here with a few black pieces around. Here, I decided to... Now here, I don't know about this move. There's probably better ways to win this game, easier ways to win this game, but here I decided to go with this sacrifice on c6. It wins the knight, and it wins two pawns and the knight. So really, it's kind of an even exchange. At the end of the day, it'll put me up 2 pawns in the endgame, and rook versus rook and a king and pawn endgame, king and rook endgame, but I'm up 2 pawns. That's what it's doing. As you'll see here in a second, rook takes on c6, pawn takes rook, rook takes on c6, check, king to d7, and now we're about to hit the most critical moment of the game. Here's what happened in this game. Now this is the reason why I'm showing you this game. In this position, I played king takes knight, and I immediately resigned. The game ended here. This is not a joke. You can see here 0-1. The next move in the game just says 0-1. There's no moves past here. This is the end of the game. I played king takes knight and immediately resigned. And can you see why I resigned? Because I saw this. Let's go to analyze. All right. Let's just go to the end of the game real quick. I saw this. Rook to f5 check. King to c4. King takes rook, and black is winning. What I missed was, I know it's obvious, it's really obvious. After rook f6 check, rook f5 check, I just simply had king e4, and now I'm counterattacking his rook. So if he takes my rook like this, I take his rook, and I'm easily winning. As I have a pass pawn here, I'm up 2 pawns. I mean, anyone looking at this position can easily tell that white's easily winning this game, as I can just take these pawns here. One of my pawns is going to promote, no problem whatsoever. But what makes this even worse of a blunder, like, I resigned in a winning position, and what makes it even worse is that this is a correspondence game. Don't resign unless you know for sure. That's the moral of this game that I'm trying to show here is don't resign unless you absolutely know for sure that there's no way you can win or draw the game. Because I mean, yeah, that's what you should never resign in blitz games, live chess games, bullet games, that kind of stuff, because you never know what kind of mistakes your opponent could make and end up losing the game after being in a winning position. So don't resign in blitz, don't resign in bullet games in such a short time control game. But this was even worse because this was in a correspondence game. I had 3 days per move. I played this king takes knight move, and I almost instantly resigned because I saw this rook check, and that was all I saw. I saw that rook check on f5, and I did not look at the position any further, and I just resigned almost immediately, like instinctively just resigned in a completely winning position. And I overlooked this king e4 move completely. And it's a huge blunder to resign like that. And you should never resign in a correspondence game in when you're up material like that without looking at the board for at least a few more seconds, like I had 3 days per move. I resigned within 3 seconds. Like I swear it was like that fast. So just whenever you resign a chess game or resign any game, always make sure you know what you're resigning for. Always make sure you know what you're doing. Don't make the same mistake as me because this was absolutely terrible. This was a terrible mistake on my part. And from this game, I've definitely learned that I do need to pay a closer attention to the chessboard whenever I'm about to resign a game because you never know when you're resigning in a winning position. I think this has actually happened to me more than once before this game. I've actually resigned in a few winning positions before. Um, so yeah, I think that's going to be about it here. Let's just see if I had played the correct move, King e4, King takes Rook, King takes Rook. Let's just see how the game would have played out. G4, H takes G4, H takes G4, King takes G4, and yeah, it's just obviously easily winning. King B5, D5, King C5. The king's just got too many responsibilities. Has to get rid of this pawn. Has to get rid of this pawn. Has to get rid of this pawn. Has to get rid of this. It's not. You just can't do it. King F5. King takes. G4. You get the picture. I mean, there's no way to stop white from promoting here. I'm easily winning, but I didn't get to this position because I resigned in that winning position with Rook to F5 check. And yeah, it's crazy because in a correspondence game, like there's no excuse for that. Like it's a correspondence game. You have 3 days per move. But in a live blitz game, you still shouldn't resign. But it's a lot easier to miss a move like that in a live game where there's a shorter time control than if in a live game where there's a shorter time control, it's easier to miss something like that than in a 3-day correspondence game. It's just really no excuse for that. So like, I hope if anyone happens to be watching this either one day in the future or I don't know right now, then I hope that this made some sense. So just don't resign instinctively. Just look at the position. Like make better decisions. Like don't be like me and resign in a winning position with barely even looking at the position. But I'm rambling right now. I guess I'll be back next Friday. I'm not really sure if I'm going to do a video next Friday, but I probably will. I think that's going to do it. Bye for now.